Today we're going to talk about a concept called narrative point of view. You might have heard both of those terms separately before, but we're going to talk about what it means when we're reading a work of fiction. To do this, we are going to make digital Cornell notes. When we make digital Cornell notes, we title the Cornell notes with our topic, narrative point of view. And we always include an EQ or an essential question. Today's essential question is, what are the 5 different types of narrative point of view? Cornell notes are also called 2-column notes, just aka. There is a Q column on the left-hand side, and that is a place for students to write quiz questions that they think their teachers might ask of them, or important terms that they want to remember. In class, your teacher will write down the notes section and you will copy. Once you're finished writing all of the notes, you go back as a student and you fill in the Q column. I want to go ahead and start these notes by defining a narrator. A narrator is whoever is telling the story. The storyteller. I'll make that a little bullet for you. Okay. We cannot talk about point of view without first defining what a narrator is, because points of view are all developed around types of narration. Okay. The magic of television. So dialogue is when characters speak, and narration is when the narrator speaks, or the storyteller. We put quotation marks to separate the narration from the dialogue. Here's an example from the dot, which you should have seen multiple times in my class. Vashti says, "I can make a better dot than that." She opened her never-before set of watercolors and set to work. Okay, so because Vashti says this, it is in quotation marks. It is dialogue. Vashti is speaking. But that's why when we talk about citing evidence, that it doesn't just have to be limited to dialogue or words that are already in quotation marks, because you can actually pull as cited evidence the narration. Now that you know what a narrator is and the difference between narration and dialogue, we can talk about first-person point of view. I'm typing this out the first time, but from now on, I'm abbreviating it POV. So if you see POV, you should know that that stands for point of view. Sometimes people call this narrative point of view. It's AKA. The narrator is a character in the story in first-person point of view. They tell the story from their own perspective using pronouns like I or we. Okay, I could put quotation marks around all of that, but first-person pronouns. I, me, we, our. I went ahead and edited my notes because I didn't like how I was writing the pronouns, and I wanted to make sure I included all of them. So the narrator is a character in the story. they tell the story from their own perspective using pronouns like I, me, my, mine, us, and ours. Remember that only the narrator's voice matters when determining point of view. And here's a pro tip. You should look at the signal words when trying to figure out the narrator's point of view. So here's an example of first-person point of view. When I stepped out into the sunlight from the darkness of the movie theater, I had only two things on my mind. Margot Robbie, who plays Harley Quinn, and a ride home. Okay, so how do we know that this is first-person point of view? Do we see any pronouns like I, me, my, mine, us, or ours? Let me go ahead and see if I can highlight in yellow any pronouns or signal words of first-person pronouns. Like I, my mind. Okay. Those are the signal words that help us to know that this is an example of first-person point of view. Less common is second-person point of view. So I'll make a new bullet. Second-person point of view. In this point of view, the narrator speaks directly to you, the reader. The signal words the signal word that's most common, using the pronoun you. So, in a second-person point of view, the narrator speaks directly to you, the reader, using the pronouns you and your. And the author might choose to do this to make you, as the reader, feel more involved in the story. A good example of this second-person point of view is the story 11 that we just read. What they never tell you is that when you're 11, you're also 10 and 9 and 8 and 7 and 6 and 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1, says Rachel, okay, who is the narrator of the story. All right. So right here, we don't know that Rachel's telling the story, and the beginning is just second-person point of view. And I like bringing that up because it is possible for a story to have more than one point of view involved in it. Okay, so what is marking this as second-person point of view? The word you. This word you are, your. And I won't mark all of them because that's redundant. Okay, so stopping right now to review. If we're thinking about first-person point of view, I want you to think about it as a video game, like a first-person shooter game. Sometimes in first-person shooter games, we can see the camera attached to our character. So the camera is showing your character's perspective. You'll notice that if you're playing a first-person shooter game or some RPG games, you can make it so that the camera is looking out of your character's eyes. And that's kind of like what first-person point of view is in a story. You are looking through the character's eyes in first-person point of view. In second-person point of view, the narrator is speaking directly to you. And it feels a little like invasive. You're like, whoa, I'm being spoken to directly. This is weird. And the author's doing that on purpose. Another time when I have noticed second-person point of view, being used is like in the short story, The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. He starts off saying like, I know you think I'm crazy, but I'm not really crazy. And the author's doing it on purpose because the whole story is kind of about how this guy committed a murder and he's feeling really guilty about it and it's driving him crazy. And so you see a lot of second person point of view because it's making you feel uncomfortable. And I think that it's done for a reason. So there are 3 different kinds of third person point of view. So as a quick review, so far we've learned about first person point of view, which is like your first person shooter RPG game. We've learned about second person point of view, which is kind of like the beginning of the story 11. And now there's 3 different kinds. Count it 1, 2, 3, which will equal 5, 2 plus 3. 3 different kinds of third person point of view. I'm going to go from the fly on the wall perspective to the God perspective. So we call third person objective point of view kind of like the fly on the wall. I tried to get an icon of a fly, but I couldn't find one, so I used a butterfly. The third person objective point of view, the narrator can only tell you what is seen or heard. They cannot know anyone else's thoughts or feelings, right? So it's kind of like just the facts, ma'am. Like you're just getting people's actions and what they say. You're not really knowing anybody's thoughts. We are objective observers, the way we observe the world, right? We can tell other people what we see and what we hear, like the reporters do. But we can't guess at someone's thoughts. We cannot know what someone is thinking unless they tell us. So we are all objective observers. That's the fly on the wall. Okay. Second, I wonder if this is going to let me write a number 2. No, 2. Okay, 2. Yes. The second kind of third person point of view is third person limited. So in third person limited, the character is limited, that's why we call it limited, to one character's thoughts and feelings. So the narrator tells us the thoughts and feelings only of one character. And this is pretty common to high school crush stories. So here's an example of third person limited point of view. Jess looked across the room at John. He was so handsome, so perfect. She wished she had the courage to tell him, but she knew that someone like him would never be interested in a nerd like her. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight the signal words or the pronouns that make this a third person limited. First, we know that we're getting inside Jess's head, so that character's name helps us to know it's one of the signal words. And she, I don't want to do all of the she's, but all of the she's here would be she knew, right? And her. All of those markers. So as a review to the last 2 points of view, all the third person point of views are going to use third person pronouns. Words like he, she, her, they, and them. All third person POVs will use these pronouns or signal words. He, she, we call these third person pronouns. Her, they, or them. Okay? When we're talking, what's separating the different types of third person point of view is how much awareness you as a reader have into the thoughts and feelings of the characters. So the pronouns are the same, right? You're given third person perspective.